Hi, my name is Tristan, and I'm making a horror game where you play as the monster. Specifically, you're a sentient character backpack who has one goal: get revenge for being abandoned and make sure no one gets in your way. In this first devlog, I want to go over some of the basics, plus getting the project set up. Earlier this year, I had the idea for a horror game where instead of running around and hiding from a monster, the player would instead play as said monster, sneaking around, causing paranoia among a house's inhabitants before striking at the most opportune moment. And ever since then, I've worked on and off on a GDD, or game design document, where I began refining this rough idea. Now that I have a significant amount of the game planned out, I figured it's a good time to start making devlogs for it. Now, I've never made a real game before, and since I want to make some more ambitious game projects in the future, this seemed like a good type of game for a beginner to make. It's simple enough that I can do it by myself, while being complex enough to introduce a bunch of problems that a game designer might need to solve at one point or another. Even at the start, the player character was pretty much always solidified in my mind. You might have seen this video if you're a fan of my music. I really liked the Banette character I came up with. Her name is B, by the way. Although in her current state, I can't use her in any commercial projects, and since I actually want to get this game on Steam, I needed to redesign her. When redesigning her, I knew I wanted to avoid what I'm dubbing top-down design.
Too often the mascots are strange from the get-go, with rows of teeth or uncanny stares.
So what I did was go, okay, she's a character backpack. What is the character she's based off of? And eventually I settled on this design. She's kind of meant to be this universe's version of Link, in that both characters are the main character of the franchise, which defined the action-adventure genre. After I had a design I was happy with, I used her design as the base for this. And one name change later, Jess is ready to be our leading lady. Now that I had a design I could use, I could actually start getting her in game. I started by modeling Jess in Blender. I'm going for an N64 style for this game, hence the low poly character. This is really only the second time I've made a low poly character, and it could be better, but it'll work for now. Her textures are nothing too special, but I am taking advantage of the texture filtering by outlining the UVs in black to get a bevel effect without wasting resolution. I still need to set up contrast maps for these so they actually look like plush materials instead of a low poly blob. After rigging her up, I exported her to Unreal Engine, which is what I'm using for this game. I spent a significant amount of time setting up this whole facial texture system thing so I could animate the textures in real time as opposed to relying on an atlas that may or may not change down the line. Now, it could be better optimized, but considering Jess only has 2 eyes to communicate with, I think I can spare some performance. That is, unless things get really out of hand, then I'll actually have to optimize the thing, but that's a potential problem for the future. Then I went about setting up her control rig. This way I can animate directly in Engine instead of hopping between 2 pieces of software. I had some trouble with the IK-FK switching, so I migrated over into Mona's rig from my Ghost of Paldea video, which you can watch here if you haven't seen it already. And when I imported, her rig broke for whatever reason, even though I migrated it like you're supposed to. But since I was only after the function I wrote for the IK-FK switching, I didn't care too much. I don't really like how the pupils can just infinitely move in any direction, despite me setting specific limits in the parameters, so I found this tutorial that shows you how you can limit the transformation of a bone without limiting the controls using the clamp node. After getting her rig working, I decided to build my own test map instead of just using the default template map so I could familiarize myself with how more internal essential systems work, like setting the default player controller in game mode. Plus, this gives me the added benefit of tailoring the map specifically to my game rather than kit bashing the one Unreal comes with. However, I did just duplicate the third-person controller because it was already there and worked well enough. I just needed to swap out the default mannequin with Jess's model and tweak the default speed to be a bit more believable. I also added a collider box in front of her so she can interact with objects that are interactable. I then set up a simple interaction system. It was so simple that it took me nearly an hour to figure out what was going wrong with my code, and why the blueprint interface didn't work. It turns out you need to set the target to other actor instead of overlapped component. How the system works is when an object overlaps the collider, you can press the interact key, and that sends a signal through the interface to the overlapped object and it executes whatever code is on the interactable. I was mainly inspired by the way Resident Evil 4 handles interaction. The way it works is if Leon is facing an interactable, be that a typewriter, pickup, or etc., He'll be able to interact with it independently of where the camera is looking, and it works the same here. You walk up to an interactable, press the interact key, and you're interacting with it. I also added this text pop-up system that I'm really happy with. How most tutorials do this typewriter text effect is when you have a new line in the middle of a word, it jumps to the line below, and I don't want that. I personally think it's annoying and distracting and just doesn't look good in most contexts. So how do we fix this? Could just manually add in the line breaks, and this could have worked well enough, but one, I plan to up a lot of text, so that would get really tedious really fast. 2, any other languages the game is translated to also need to manually set the line breaks. 3, doing it manually means I am locked into whatever text size I set it at, meaning I couldn't start programming in dialogue until I locked it in. And 4, rich text style tags will mess with things. So I set out to find a solution to this problem, and I found it. Shout out to this specific Reddit post which showed me how to do exactly what I needed to do. I want to make a full tutorial on this eventually because it's a really cool system, but essentially, instead of revealing the text, it's just swapping out style tags. It's feeding the body of the text from a tag named clear, which makes the text invisible, into the default state, which worked great until I added style tags to specific words. Then it started to bug out. Since I'm using a style tag to toggle text visibility, using another tag to color the text breaks it. Thankfully, the post had a solution for that problem as well, which I translated into this. Essentially, whenever it's a text that it's in a tag, it appends a closer tag to the front of the clear tag, and bam, jumpless text with usable style tags. This unfortunately breaks if I ever need to add in any images, but I don't know if we'll ever use any images in my text anyway, so I don't need to worry about that right now. All that's left is to hook up a sound to play every time the loop is updated, and... oh. Well, that's not good. Since I'm for all intents and purposes ignoring style tags, the counter that tracks how long the text needs to update for goes out of sync. It was an easy fix. Instead of checking the counter, I'm instead checking what index the loop is at, and it fixed the problem. I also added a check for if the current character was a space. If it is, the sound doesn't play. And that should cover everything. If you want to help this project along the way and potentially make it my full-time job, I have opened a Patreon. If you're familiar with my YouTube memberships, it works the exact same way. There's a general support tier for $1, which gives you access to videos a day early, plus an exclusive chat in my Discord. There's Supporter Plus, which is $10, and you get the name and your credits of my videos and in the game. You also get to see behind-the-scenes images and videos, and once it's ready, playtest demo of the game as the devlogs come out. Then there's Supporter Ultra, which is $25. You get access to the assets I make for videos and this game, as well as the paid items on my Ko-fi store, all for free, and you get weekly playtest builds of the game, of course once there's actual gameplay to playtest. If this sounds interesting to you, the link is in the description, but if not, I will see you in the next video. Bye bye!